Uh, Welcome. I'm Michael Howie. I'm the Director of Communications from the Fur Bearers, and I am very excited to welcome everyone here to the Dogs and Wildlife Finding the Balance in Shared Spaces webinar with two of my favorite people, Dr. Valli Fraser-Celin and Dr. Marc Bekoff, who will introduce themselves momentarily. But before we get started, I just wanted to do a quick land acknowledgement. Here in Hamilton, I'm on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. And I welcome everyone else to share in the chat if they're aware of whose territory they're on. And I believe I can even remember the website. If you go to native-land.ca, here we go, it will help you identify the indigenous peoples on the land you are currently upon. It's a really neat way to connect. A little bit of housekeeping before we get going. This is being recorded. So if you have to go, if you come in late, don't worry, you'll get a link to it later. And please ask questions as we go. The Q&A function, I believe, is open right now. Yes, Sydney is verified. Thank you, Sydney. So drop them in there as we go, and we'll resume or we'll return to all of the questions at the end of our conversation. And a final note, we're all very passionate people on this call today, and we're all dog lovers and wildlife lovers as well. So let's be kind and polite, and remember that we're focused on solutions that benefit everyone in our shared ecosystems, and that these connections that we're going to be talking about are very real and impactful in a lot of different ways. So everyone may have varying views and opinions, but we can discuss these with kindness and compassion towards each other to learn more and find ideal solutions. And now I'm going to ask Marc if you wouldn't mind just doing a quick introduction of yourself.
I'm Mark.
Awesome.
No, and I live in Boulder, Colorado. And if you know Boulder, I feel blessed. That's my view. Those are the Flatirons. I taught at University of Colorado for quite a while, courses in animal behavior and conservation, and then compassionate conservation. And I'm a field worker. And what else do I do? I work, I'm the co-chair of the Jane Goodall's ethics committee. I once was the ethics committee. And yeah, I mean, still writing some books. Jane and I have almost completed a young kids book, which is really fun. And writing young kids books is more challenging than writing a big book. Um, and I'm a real fan of dogs. I write a lot about dogs, and I think this is a really hot topic. This has been a topic for decades, as long as I've been studying wild canids um, and in fact feral dogs. So it's a great topic, and I'm thrilled to be here. And thank you all for coming.
Awesome. And it's always exciting for me. Marc was one of the first people I ever spoke to about coyotes, I think, some 15 or 18 years ago as a journalist.
Yeah,
And I find my way to shoehorn him into an interview pretty much once every 18 months since then, which I'm quite pleased with.
I'm easy.
Yeah. And Valli, could you do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Mike. I'm really excited to be here. Of course, excited to be on a webinar with Mark. I feel like this is like a new like stepping stone of my career, that to
Oh,
be like
you're
a,
you're kind.
a guest on a webinar with Dr. Marc Bekoff, because I've been a fan for many, many years. I did my PhD in geography on human African wild dog conflict and conservation in Botswana.
Hmm.
And then following that, I did a postdoc in Calgary at the University of Calgary in community health sciences, and that's where I really got into dogs. I did some work on access to veterinary care and One Health and dogs in Indigenous communities. And since then, I've been working basically kind of in the field on dogs and access to veterinary care. Currently, I'm the companion animal manager at Veterinarians Without Borders. And I also work with the fur bearers. I write some blog posts a couple times a month, do some science communication. And I also did a project with the fur bearers and Dr. Stephanie Rutherford, who is the wolf historian of Canada. We did the first national research project on Canadian perceptions of wolves. So we normally see regional kind of examinations of people's perspectives, but we were the first group to do a Canadian perspective on wolves. And yeah, I am super passionate about dogs and force-free training in particular. So I have an Instagram account called The Lives of Wild Dogs, which was actually the title of my PhD dissertation. But yeah, I do a lot of advocacy around dogs and force-free training, and also a bit around wildlife conservation and wolves in particular, and around access to veterinary care as well.
Awesome.
Here.
Yeah, a nice big range of experience across these two
Yeah.
great people. Although
Great.
one advantage Valli does have over Mark is she was in the room the first time I tried to politely eat ramen, traditional ramen with those tools with this beard. Yeah, we've been through some stuff now. Let's just say that.
We have, yeah.
But today we are talking about dogs and wildlife. And one of the reasons that we really wanted to get this webinar together, this conversation going, is we very frequently at the Fur Bears hear about incidents of so-called conflict or negative encounters and interactions between wildlife and people. And often the case is an off-leash dog may have gone ahead and startled another animal. Often out in nature, they encounter wildlife. And as soon as that occurs, the narrative becomes very anthropocentric, I suppose is the easiest way to put it. It becomes, what did the person see happen? And that's what happened. And it really discounts a lot of essential behaviors. And at the same time, we also know that dogs need a lot of ability to play and be silly and explore and be curious to fulfill their needs. And as compassionate pet companions, that's something that we all want, but it does put us in that very difficult position of how do we balance these things? How do we ensure that wildlife are safe, that they have space, but also that our dogs are safe and have the ability to express their needs and be themselves? And that's what we're going to explore a bit today in this conversation. And I've broken it into a few sections. And to begin with, we're going to talk a bit about wildlife responses. So, Mark, could you explain what's happening for a wild animal in their body or brain when they encounter a dog by surprise or get chased by a dog who's off leash, which is, again, often the case, especially in urban areas?
Yeah, I mean, that's a multifaceted question. I mean, when they're prey animals, depending on their experiences, I'm sure they feel fear, anxiety, they're stressed out. They could be surprised by depending where they live, they could be surprised by seeing a dog. I think their normal response would be, the sort of to flee, to try to increase the distance between them and an intruding dog. But having lived in the mountains outside of Boulder for decades, a lot of the deer up there, and I've heard the same with people living where there are elk and moose. I mean, elk and moose don't have much to fear from a dog, basically, but dogs could still harass them, and they would be afraid. They adapt to the present. So when I had a few dogs when I lived in the mountains and on a road, and there was about only 6 other houses, and all the dogs would come down to my house, and the deer there they just basically ignored the dogs after a while. They just adapted to them, but I think it would just be the normal prey, fear of predator response. And when I studied coyotes outside of Jackson Hole years ago, in the Grand Teton National Park, you would see, especially because since I was studying coyotes, we were where there were coyotes, and there were, deer and other prey animals, and they just behaved the same to the coyotes. Some adapted to the presence, but they were really more vigilant. And there's been some studies, and one of my students did a study where, I mean, boiling through the years of field work, mothers with a young were more vigilant, and so people will go, duh, of course. Well, when you're trading off behaviors in the wild, if you're spending time being vigilant, you're not doing something else.
Mm.
So it affected their basically their activity budgets, if you will. They couldn't go off and do certain things when they were more protective and vigilant because there were coyotes around. So that would be my answer,
Yeah.
uh, but we will get into the fact. Some people around here and elsewhere have said, well, the deer ignored my dogs, so they don't care if they chase them.
Mm.
Yeah, they do care if they're chased.
Yeah.
Then which to me tells you they're not really ignoring your dogs.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting way of putting it too, is that the dogs are just chasing, and something that dogs do, we know, is chase. They love to chase.
Yes.
Any runner in the room is going to know
Yeah.
if you're running and you see a dog, the first thing you do is stop running, because that dog is just going to chase you. It's
Yeah.
going to happen. It's instinct.
Mhm.
And Valli, to us, from our perspective as companions, it often seems like the dogs, they're just playing. As Marc
Yeah.
said, oh, they're just checking out the deer. They're just having a good
Mhm.
time. Um,
Mhm.
is that wrong, or are we only seeing one of the possible perspectives?
Yeah, I mean, this is where it's so important for us as dog guardians to learn dog body language.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because we see this all the time on social media. People think their dog is happy, and you can see their stress signals, and all of these and it's not, it might not be so subtle with wildlife, but a tail wag, right? A lot of people don't interpret a tail wag properly.
Mhm.
And a dog might be wagging their tail, but it might be high up, it might be a stiff wag. And, they might think, oh, my dog's being playful, but there really are very over aroused or over threshold. So this is where I think, a lot of folks might be misinterpreting dog behavior and body language. And that's where it's so important to get that education out there so that folks can tell the difference between a playful dog wagging its tail or a curious look versus a non-curious look versus a hard stare versus
Mhm.
soft eyes. A tail wag in one instance might not look like a loose, nice tail wag that you would see in a different context. So I think it's really important for folks who are, you know, out in areas where there are wildlife to, understand their dog's body language as well.
Yeah, it's a
And
great
can I
point.
say, I think you're exactly right, and um, that's why when people say, "Oh, my dog is just playing," the deer might not know that, and
Mhm.
and they'll focus on one aspect of the dog's behavior. And as an ethologist, I was trained to look at what we call composite signals. The tail, the body, the gait, the stance.
Yeah.
Are they vocalizing? They're certainly giving off odors.
Yep.
And I totally agree with Valia. And I always say to people, you need to become dog literate or fluent in dog. You
Absolutely.
it's a dog is more than just a tail or floppy ears pinned back. So
Yeah.
good. Thanks for saying that, because people yell at me sometimes. Oh, you're just being academic. And I'm going, no, I'm trying to save your dog's ass, by the way.
Yeah.
Totally, totally. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it always shocks me that we've been living alongside dogs for thousands and thousands of years, and so many people still don't know basic dog body
Yep.
language.
Yeah.
So,
I
Good.
think one of the unfortunately helpful situations for that is if you ever lived with a reactive dog that you're trying to be
Yeah.
kind with and supportive of.
Yep.
I had in one apartment with my old gal JJ, the neighbor's dog, and when you talk about the hard eyes and the whole, looking at the whole body in the stance, that was for me the indication of, this isn't a dog who's being defensive or reactive. This is a dog who wants to harm, and just everything was tense. Everything is forward. It's that stare, the hard stare value you spoke of. And if I would let my hand go a little bit from their chest, he'd immediately push up against it to try and get to JJ again. Just
mhm.
Yeah.
any amount of give. Oh, I'm going. And it's almost like anyone who ever played sports, one-on-one sports of some kind, you learn to read these very subtle signals in the person
Mhm.
across from you. And we can do that with dogs. But as you've both said, that takes time and education. And before we jump into that, I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit more about how human associated dogs influence wildlife territory movement or predator prey dynamics. Mark, you spoke briefly about how some deer or elk are able to just kind of adapt a bit, but then other animals may delay going out to get food and delay other behaviors because they are being protective. Valli, have you seen any other types of changes as a result of dogs in the field?
Yeah, I mean, you're very right, and Mark's super right about this too. And Mark will know, the landscape of fear in prey animals, especially where they are spending more time being vigilant, and that can have some benefits on the landscape as well, as we've
Hmm.
seen in, the how wolves change rivers. If you've seen that
Mhm.
YouTube video, it really does talk about that. But there's also those. I mean, it can cause a lot of stress and it can cause a lot of animals to move out of their, specific territories. They may abandon dens as well, abandon their young
Hmm.
sometimes. So that can have a huge, impact not only on, movement and territory, but also on, long-term success of these wildlife animals and their populations as well. And I'm sure Mark has a lot to add to that too.
I mean, well, no, you're 100% right. So you also need to know if it's deer, say, deer behavior,
Hmm.
and they may not be showing the concern.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's always a trade-off. If you're doing A, you're not doing B, and if you're doing B, you may not be doing A. You're trading things off, and
Yeah.
you're right. They may delay going off and getting food, grazing around. And it, it's something, I don't know if anybody's ever studied quality, like when you've got nursing young, I
Mm.
mean, like, does
Yeah,
it
those
change?
stress hormones and stuff.
Yeah, right,
That get
exactly.
passed down. Yep. Yeah, that's
I
super
used to say that and people would laugh, and I'd say, well, it ain't so funny if you're like a prey animal out there and there's a
important.
big dog coming around who, may not have ever seen you before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I a couple of more than a couple of years, about 2 decades ago, there was a case in Boulder where a dog was a highly playful dog. I mean, really, and chased a fawn into a fence, and the barbed wire fence. They had to they had to euthanize the fawn. I was there, and they didn't do it just because it was the easy thing to do. It was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. And Mom Deer was around, and you can only imagine what she was feeling
Mm,
watching
Ugh.
her her child wrapped in a barbed wire fence and then having to be killed.
it's
So
awful.
there's
Yeah.
consequences.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I can speak briefly in Toronto. Speaking of Toronto, the many people may have known of the Liberty Village Coyotes. Coyote Watch Canada was involved in that on the street, who works with us at the Fur Bears. And from what I have read and been told and put together, one of the biggest problems was off leash dogs
Hmm.
harassing coyotes. And then coyotes learned you can't trust dogs because they're
Hmm.
coming for you. And
Yeah.
they started reacting in
Yeah.
a new way as a result of that harassment, which just escalated issues there and ultimately led to the coyotes both being killed in that area,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But that is, I think it's another example of, yeah, your dog's chasing away this coyote. That's a good thing, right? Well, not necessarily,
Not
especially in a
necessarily.
dense urban area.
Yep.
We're not talking about a farm field in northern Alberta where, yes, you want your livestock guardian dog to do that. And it then keeps spinning off in different ways. But let's talk a bit about meeting dogs' needs, because I think this is going to be, for me, this is the challenging area that we kind of get into.
Hmm.
And I think to start, Valli, could you explain what some of the social, emotional, or physical needs dogs may have that aren't always met, even by well meaning companions?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, dogs are social animals. They are not pack animals. They're not kind of this, idea of what a lot of dog trainers and folks put out there, but they are very social. So, we know that they like to be with people. And a lot of folks who have dogs, will, I think, gear towards that physical aspect of exercise, right? Physical exercise. And you see this all the time with like, you've got someone walking like, at a quick pace and they're got their dog like 2 inches from their side and they're just like, this is what my dog needs. And you'll see that with like border collies and,
Yep.
kind of those more higher, hyperactive dogs. They just need to walk and they need their physical exercise. But we're seeing, and as this is especially true in the community that I'm in and kind of the positive reinforcement, force-free dog training community, is meeting our dog's needs mentally, emotionally, socially, especially through enrichment. Sniffing is huge. Like dogs see the world through their noses, right? Like that 20 minutes of sniffing that you're getting annoyed with because you have to go on your walk and your dog has decided to sniff every single blade of grass. Well,
Mhm.
that we call it reading their P-mails, right? They're out figuring out what's happening in the neighborhood and they're seeing who's healthy and who's sick and who's been around and who's hung around, for a while and which cat came by, which dog came by, was it their friend or was it their foe? Like, so there's so much that dogs can learn through, mental stimulation and enrichment items. We talk a lot about contra freeloading and basically having dogs not so much that it's working for their food. A lot of people think it's working for their food, but it
Right.
really is about engaging in those natural behaviors like scavenging and foraging. Dogs are scavengers. If we the way that we live with our dogs in Western society, in North America and in Europe, is not the way that most dogs live in the world. Most dogs are free roaming. Most dogs are scavenging for their food. They've got so much agency, they have so much control and choice in their lives. And I think that's what a lot of folks these days are trying to push, as the new narrative of dog ownership or dog guardianship, is really meeting the needs of dogs instead of kind of imposing what we think is best for dogs.
Yep, I think that's it's very well said. That's something that I learned a lot about myself from Mark and his writing, which was very impactful and continues to be impactful for me, and changed my relationship with my gal JJ, and
Oh,
then just
good.
how I encounter wildlife. I talk to wildlife I see now, and my partner and people tease me about it, but realistically, I feel closer and more connected because it's saying, "Hi, Robin." And the robin tweets at me and flies away. It's like, well, sorry. And the squirrel chattering at me. Yes, I know. I'm moving away from you. Don't worry. And it for me feels like there is at least some cyclical nature of that. But that is something you talk about in Unleashing Our Dogs, one of your great books, Mark, where you talk about our need to untether our perspective and consider our dog's perspective, which I think is a lot of what Value is just saying.
Oh,
But you
yeah.
also speak to the need to actually have leash free time and things like that.
Hmm.
Can you tell us a bit more about what that looks like on a day to day basis?
Yeah, it depends where you live. I mean, like, well, we're in Boulder and in the United States, there's lots of dog parks. There's not many dog parks in the UK, for example. So it depends where you live. But the off-leash time is really important. And what Valley was saying, too, is like people use homed dogs. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but they use homed dogs as the model for who dogs are and how they behave. And just by going, I've spent a lot of time at dog parks here, and people say, "And you get paid to do that?" And I go, "Well, that's my job." And,
Ethology.
but yeah, right. I was going to actually get back to the ethological approach to the study of dogs and other animals. But it's just find a place. I mean, it's hard when you're in New York City. You can't let your dog run down Madison Avenue. But, if you're in a place, find a place where even if it's a huge backyard, I mean, where your dog feels the agency, they're making choices, you're not controlling them, and they can go out. And it's not like, come on, there's nothing there. You hear that all the time when people are on leash. And your dog it's not only sniffing, it's trying to locate senses,
Mhm.
locate sounds. So in Unleashing Your Dog, we stress the importance of letting dogs not only exercise their body, but also exercise their senses. And it can be enriching. And the one thing I hear from a lot of my friends around here, is that among the things they've learned is letting your dog sniff, because you're right, Valli, they see the world, they sense the world, through their nose. And, don't say oh, come on, there's nothing there, because for the dog, it could be a symphony, and it's enriching. As they get different, they hear different things, they see different things, they smell different things. It's all part of enriching their lives. So I always tell people, think of what your dog really likes to do and enrich them. Give them the time. The walk, if you need to, is for them. And when I lived in the mountains and I was home, not when I was gone, because I had cougars and coyotes and foxes, and bears around my house, the dogs could just hang out, and they would mostly stay in front of my office. I had a separate office, and they would sleep a lot of the day. But, people would say, well, that's all they do is sleep. Well, no, that's not all they do. But they knew they could get up, and I would plant food around the acreage, little marble-sized kibble, and they would spend hours looking for it.
Mhm.
That was enriching to them.
Mhm.
And the other thing that's important, and I know Valli and you all know this, is dogs have different personalities. So if you want to replace a dog, if you will, of a dog of the same breed or the same mix, but especially among people who or pervertedly clone dogs, they're not going to be the same. They'll say, "Well, I've had golden retrievers all my life, and now my new one isn't the same. What do you think?" And what I really want to say is, I think you just should learn dog. But what I always say is, well, they have unique personalities.
Yeah.
But enrichment means you need to focus on the dog themselves, who they are. Are they shy? Are they bold? What turns them on? Avoid what turns them off. And I always say you can't spoil a dog. I mean, yes, maybe you can, but you can't spoil a dog. Your average home dog has
Mm.
a fairly boring life, if you will.
Yeah.
And dogs have wolf genes in them. They have wolf engrams in their brains, but they're not wolves. I mean, that's the
Mhm.
thing you try to,
That's what you
convince
try. Yeah, you
people.
try to explain to it. Yeah.
So
Where
just
the like hunting, scavenging, that's all those kind of, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, and I'd like to keep that ball rolling with the they're not wolves, because that is something that some people have very aggressively pursued as an idea, and even look at. Incidentally, I find amusing. They talk about wolves and why we need to model dog training on wolves, and then point to the Meach studies that David Meach himself have come out and said, nope, that wasn't right. There isn't an alpha. That's not how this works. We were studying wolves in captivity, which again, Mark, you alluded to with talking about companion dogs being studied for dogs' natural behavior. It changes it. So could we talk a bit more about that concept of there needs to be an alpha in the room with a dog? Maybe Mark, you were already sort of talking a bit about that. We'll keep it going, then swatch back to Valli.
Oh, you want me to start? I don't.
Yeah,
Oh,
just a little bit more about that
well,
that
here's it
alpha
in a nutshell,
concept.
because Dave Meese is a friend, and we've talked about this over the years.
Mhm.
There are alpha, and he agrees to this. I know there are, depending how you define the term, because that's
Mhm.
what it means. There are dominant dogs. There are alpha dogs. Okay, but alpha doesn't is not synonymous with aggressive, assertive, being nasty, bossy, obnoxious. It's it's a relative ranking within a social group. And what we know, I mean, I've seen this in wild wolves, I've seen it in wild coyotes, I've seen it in groups of free-ranging dogs. There can be a hierarchy. I don't like to call them dominance hierarchies. I call them social hierarchies, because the word dominance implies certain things, and there are leading animals. But it's expressed in different ways. And decades ago, one of my colleagues as a grad student, Randy Lockwood, devised an incredibly creative experiment. They was looking at the wolves in Point Barrow, Alaska, and a theory came out from a guy named Michael Chance, who's a primatologist, who said that when you look at a group of primates, I mean, people have refuted certain things. It doesn't really matter. The idea was really, really salient. He said the higher ranking animals receives the most attention, and it was called the attention structure theory of dominance. So it wasn't because they asserted themselves or just, wantonly beat up every other animal. And Randy put a board up in a captive pack and looked at who received the most attention on the other side of the board. And if he put a quote lower ranking animal there, they didn't get much attention. When the alpha animal, the high ranking animal, whoever you want to call them, was a way they paid attention to them. And I've actually seen things like that, and people have seen that in groups of free ranging dogs. So I wrote a paper when I started writing for Psychology Today. I got blasted by people really nastily by saying there were dominant dogs and alpha dogs, and there was dominance relationships. And this one guy who ultimately was removed from writing for Psychology Today, maybe not only because of me, said there's no such thing as dominance. The reason is among some dog trainers, and Valli could, corroborate or disagree, is because when people hear that, they want to be the alpha in the pack in their home. No, I mean, and then because of Cesar Millan and others, they translate alpha into abusing the dogs. I mean, that's cutting through the chase.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But there's no animals I know who don't form some sorts of social relationships. And there's no animals I've ever studied or read about where at some point an individual doesn't assert, if you will, they could be saving a group, they could be leading them, they could be protecting them. So I still argue that if you use those terms carefully, they're valid. And I actually just recently talked to Dave Meach about it again, but it's been abused by popular TV shows where you be the leader of your pack, and the leader means you beat up, you shock dogs, the whole
Mm-hmm.
spiels, Valli. No, that's not what they do.
Yeah.
Do they fight with one another? Yeah. Do they sometimes harm or kill one another? They do, but that's not the modus operandi.
Yeah.
And
Well, it
so
doesn't make sense either, right?
yeah, and you wouldn't expect that's why animals have evolved threat signals, appeasance signals,
Yeah.
submissive signals, and that's why I think the ethological approach to the study of dog behavior and training or dog teaching is the way to go. Just understand who they are, how they came to be who they are, and that they still have wolf engrams and wolf genes in them, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not dumbed down wolves. I mean, that's another thing that people say.
Mm-hmm.
Then I go, yeah, what do you think about it? And usually I say, well, it's time for a beer.
Yeah, it's Miller time.
It's
Uh,
Miller's.
yeah.
No, but it's good beer time.
Well, now we're gonna get sued, but that's fine.
That's
Uh, Valli, do you have
Yeah.
anything to add to that thought? I mean,
I
my
mean,
my one takeaway, sorry, I just was
yeah.
it sounded very much like describing high school to me as well when we talk about like it's not just dogs and wolves.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, Valli.
I mean, if you talk about dominance with, ethologists or wildlife biologists, and then you say the word dominance in the training community, the two words have two very different meanings
Mm-hmm.
to each group of folks. And it is unfortunate that, the word dominance has been co-opted by popular TV dog trainers
Mhm.
who are unfortunately still on TV propagating
Yeah.
this nonsense. But dominance is not necessarily a bad thing, and it can be very fluid. It's access to resources. It has a completely different meaning when you're talking about dominance in wildlife and you're talking about dominance in dogs when it comes to kind of the popular understanding of these words. So, I think Mark's right, it's not a bad word. It just has the actual meaning of dominance is very different than what the dog training, the balanced and compulsion-based dog training community has taken it to now mean within the dog training community. And unfortunately, as Mark was saying, it has become an excuse to,
Mm.
mistreat and abuse dogs in under the guise of training. And it's really sad to see that, and we see all the talking coming back to dog body language, the amount of stress that these dogs are under when they're being trained under this kind of pack leadership
Hmm.
mentality. And it really it's really unfortunate that this, we're still here talking about this
Yeah.
alpha,
I
dominance issue in dog training, because it's completely inhumane, it's not ethical, and the experts like Marc and the vet behaviorists, they've all come out with these position statements that, this isn't the right way to train dogs. And at the end of the day, even if we're thinking about this in that way, that the pack leadership mentality, we're not dogs. We can't communicate with dogs in the same way that they can communicate with each other. We're not the same, right? We have to meet our dogs where they are, and we have to learn more about
Yeah.
dogs, and we have to learn about them and who they are through their behavior, through their body language, instead of kind of putting our human conceptions, like we hear the, respect, accountability, consequences. We hear this all the time, instead of kind of looking at the science behind learning and the science behind dog training, because it is a science. It's not just this fluff that we pick out of the air and decide this is how we're going to train dogs. There's a
Mhm.
whole psychology behind it as well.
Yeah, I mean, your statement, meet them where they are, is apt. Should be a bumper sticker because there's different
I think there
personalities.
are stickers out there that says meet them where they are. I'll find one
Oh,
from Mark and I'll
oh,
mail it to you.
okay. No, but you're right. And that personalities or predispositions to do certain things change. Dogs can have a bad night of sleep. They can have nightmares. They can have, I always used to say, they can have gas. They can have
Yeah,
upset stomachs. And my friends would
yeah.
go, yeah. Um, but you're right. And it's changing. It's like with people, it's dynamic. It can flip in a heartbeat as it can. And I don't mean that in a negative way, in social groups, just like it does in humans.
Mhm.
So it's really important not to stereotype your dog because of breed or mix, or because it's easier for you to then interact and abuse them.
Yeah.
They'll say, well, you used to do this. Well, people used to do something and now they've changed. So to
Mhm.
me, it's the excitement of the change and the dynamic relationships that you form. And I always call the emotions the social glue. Pet rocks don't make it, robotic dogs don't make it. And when I talk to people at local dog parks or on trails around here, because Boulder's a good outdoor place for free running dogs, they love hearing that kind of stuff. Some people will say, well, I just got a dog. I don't want to learn all that crap. And I'll go, you shouldn't have got, what do you think? And I usually want to say, you shouldn't have gotten a dog. But then, of course, they're usually bigger than me and they're going to yell at me and blah, 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 blah. But I think, and, the trainers I work with, particularly one around here, too, when they try to educate the people and they make it fun, they
Mhm.
make it really rewarding. You can see the glow in people's eyes saying, wow, my relationship with my dog has really changed for the better. And I'm not putting him in a shoebox, and stuff. They like variation, like, they like, quote, working for food. It's funny, I made a note about what the notes that Michael said. There's a difference though between asking them, not demanding, but asking them to work for food. A lot of wild animals do too. It could be for other reasons that they do it, but part of it is it could simply be enriching. It
Mhm.
just reduces the boring life of, oh yeah, I'm going to the dog park, and then my human's going to go to Starbucks, and then they're going off in their car somewhere. They usually come home pissed off. I don't get my afternoon or night walk. So leave me alone,
Yeah.
enrich my life on my own. So yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think,
something else, oh,
oh,
sorry,
no,
Mike.
no, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Something that you mentioned, Mark, like how dogs can have bad days, or they can have a bad sleep, or they can have an upset
Yep.
stomach. I mean, there's a lot of my colleagues and friends, in particular, one of my favorite trainers who on Instagram is dog-minded, they're really starting to talk about health and behavior and the link between pain and
Yes.
behavior and health and behavior. And a lot of folks are starting to see, how much that affects your dog's everyday life, right? If you're
Yeah.
in chronic pain, like you're going to be cranky or you're going to chase
Yep.
the squirrel maybe a bit more in your backyard or you might be a bit grumpier, right? So I think, that relationship between pain and behavior is starting to really come out in the dog training world and that when you're using these aversive tools in dog training like shock collars or prong collars, first of all, you're causing more pain. And
Hmm.
secondly, you're over, you might be not seeing the why the behavior is happening versus you're just
Yeah.
making the behavior go away, right?
Yeah.
Instead of looking at the causes. And a lot of that can be pain related.
Well,
Discomfort is a powerful, powerful thing when it comes to behavior for humans as well. As someone
uh-huh.
who's gone through it with anxiety disorders and learning the difference between pain and discomforts and that kind of thing, it's the amount of behavior driven by this makes me uncomfortable, so I'm going to do that instead, just subconsciously that you have to slow down and catch yourself in. And you imagine that's
Yeah.
with big prefrontal cortex and a whole bunch of therapy. We can see that dogs just live it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
wildlife.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Go
No,
ahead.
I had a trainer, which I mean, they're just awful, that they would call themselves a trainer. They were really, a monarch. Um, Talk on the one hand about separation anxiety, and then in the same sentence almost say, but dogs don't really have these emotions. So I decided that number one, I would never recommend anybody to go see this person, but really it blew my mind, and the physical discomfort, and wrapped into, say, the psychological, or Jessica Pierce, who I work with really
Mhm.
closely, has written a lot about that. And if you ever lived with a dog, I don't mean you, but you know that they have bad days. They may have had a bad dream. They just may have an upset stomach, and I remember with some of my dogs, because they could really be outside a lot, but they slept inside. Um, that when they got really antsy at night, I knew I had 15 seconds to get them to the front door before they pooped all over my
Yeah.
living room. I mean, and they were telling me, I don't feel well. But a lot of people will say, yeah, they were walking around. I just told them to go back to sleep. And then an hour later, they peed all over. I'm going, they say, what do you think? And I never would tell them what I think because I'm not a belligerent person. But I would think, once again, read about dogs or don't get a dog.
Yeah.
I've just been going through this with some people, and they'll go, well, we want to get a dog. We want to rescue a dog. There's so many dogs to be rescued. I say, well, I understand, but can you give them the good life? Can you give them a dog-centered life? Can you
Mhm.
get
Mhm.
over your own ego?
Yeah.
And sometimes that irritates people because they say, I really want a dog.
Yeah.
They say, I really need a dog. And I'm thinking, well, there's a lot of things I need too, but I wouldn't go out and get a sentient being
Mhm.
to be my friend because I need them. I want them. I want to give them the best life, excuse me, the best life possible.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
That's very fair. And I think that's also a great opportunity to say, hey, go volunteer at the shelter, walk
Yep.
the dogs, get to know them, learn how this
Yep.
works.
Mhm.
I'd like to move along to shared spaces. This is sort of a big part of why we're here today.
Hmm.
And there's folks from all over the world on this call, which is great. But in Canada, we really love our parks, trails, and outdoor spaces around our homes. Most of our major cities have some kind of trail network or green
Hmm.
space dedicated. But we're also seeing more and more urban wildlife, if not more, at least more visibly. And the media is reminding us of that pretty regularly. It's in these spaces we find often that this human perceived conflict or human started conflict occurs. Uh,
Hmm.
Valley, in backyards, in our average urban homes, suburban homes, what are some things we can do to help reduce that kind of encounter?
I mean, check your yard at night. That's when everyone gets sprayed by skunks.
Yeah.
Always at night.
The one
That's when the
time I let
raccoon.
JJ run in without me is
Yeah.
the one time in 12 years she got skunked.
Yeah. Yeah. Check your yard, have some floodlights, maybe, or motion sensor lights. You know, just make sure your dog is leashed in urban areas. Like,
Mhm.
there are people who walk their dogs off leash in down the street in neighborhoods, and you know, that's where you're gonna get. I mean, it's not just wildlife. It's, you've got stray cats, you've got, you know, tons of animals, and it's squirrels, like, right? So it is really about kind of following those leash laws, and especially in urban areas. Check your yard, especially if your dog might be a bit more prone to chasing, or if you don't have a good recall on your dog. Go out at night, check before you you go out, or have really good fencing in your backyard. So I think it's really, just being vigilant, and knowing that, like, these that wildlife are around. Like,
Yep.
you could have a
Mhm.
skunk in your yard at any point. And Facebook groups are really good for that too. Like, my Facebook group will tell us when there's a skunk in the neighborhood.
Mm.
Oh,
So
like a neighborhood watch.
the
Yep.
neighborhood
Oh,
watch, yeah.
Pretty
There's a
what a
much.
skunk.
great idea. No, that's a
Yeah.
great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that can be really helpful. And that's, I think,
Yeah.
that the number
I
one
like
tip
that.
I've given and heard across the board over the years is, if you're taking your dog into the backyard at night and you're worried about wildlife issues, go with them.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
I, I once told my neighbor that, and there was that hello, duh moment.
Yeah.
Not because they were stupid, but I said, go with them.
Mhm.
Sometimes the simplest answer is just kind of the most mind-blowing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think that kind of also comes back to, like, we also need to adapt our lives to our
Mhm.
dogs,
yes.
right? It's not just about them fitting into our lives, and I need a dog. I want a dog because it's an accessory and it looks good and it completes my family. It's really about, you fitting into your dog's life as well. Like, we just had a new dog. We've had this dog for a month, and there's some separation distress exhibiting, so we don't leave him alone.
Yep.
Just don't, right. I mean,
We
that's
don't
what
leave
I
them alone
tell
until
people.
we
Mhm.
can get on the meds and have a lot of training in separation anxiety. So, once we start doing all of that, but right now it's just about feeling comfortable, feeling safe, feeling like he can trust us. And, we're shaping our lives around his needs and what he needs right now. And that's
Mhm.
not being by himself.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, and I think great pivot point, Mark. I know you've been an avid cyclist in the mountains and elsewhere, and you spend a lot of time in different wilderness spaces. What are your top tips for people with dogs on trails, or if they're out in the backcountry?
Oh God, don't get me going. I actually got bitten by a dog last September.
Oh,
I turned out not to, well, I mean, it was serious. I got a puncture. Um, when I see something happen, I'm very careful about it. But when I'm on my bike and I could probably outrun them, I could outride them. But I explain to people, and they will ask me sometimes, well, we have so many multi-use trails around here: cycling, running, walking, and dogs off leash. So they have, what is it? Sight and sight control, or there's a name for it. You know, oh, right, where your dog you have to be able to see your dog, and they have to come back, and
Mhm.
if you call them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I explain to people, the first thing I say is, if there's some kind of bad interaction, your dog is going to pay for it. You're not. You may pay for it psychologically because you love your dog. And that actually gets a lot of people to think about it,
Mhm.
think about the consequences. I mean, you may not be jailed, you could be fined, for it. So think of part of your dog's well-being is they may love running around in multi-use open spaces, but your dog could also get injured,
Yep.
Mhm.
you know. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that your dog trusts you to to have their best interests in mind. So make sure that there's something you can do that will get your dog to stop doing what they're not supposed to do. And it's usually harassing cyclists like me, harassing runners. Not all dogs chase movement, but it's pretty it's pretty hardwired that when a lot of dogs see a rolling ball or
Yep.
something running away from them or riding away, they chase them in fun. I mean, it's mostly play. Yeah, you've got these aggressive dogs, but the one thing I do tell them is you're responsible for your dog's well-being. And I love the fact that you let your dog run free. But if you don't feel you have great control over them, don't let them run free. And some people will say, well, I'll just take them to a dog park. And I'll go, that's not fair. I mean, what happens if your dog just launches on another dog?
Mm-hmm.
And then of course some people just get upset and they go, you're making it so difficult to have a dog. And well, fine. I mean, if you think it's difficult to train your dog, to teach your dog to do certain things or not to do certain things, maybe you shouldn't have a dog.
Yep.
And that, of course, opens another door. But that's how I feel about it, because Boulder is a great place. I mean, around not even in town. I mean, but right outside of town, there's dog parks, there's running trails, there's hiking trails. You can bring it in the mountains. It's really easy to find a place near town where your dog is allowed to run free. So it's your responsibility as their human to teach them manners.
Yep.
And to have whatever it is. I had certain things that I could do around my house where I didn't even actively train them, but if my hand went in my right pocket, they came back to me because I had all my neighbors' dogs and people would bring dogs, because there's cougars around and there's coyotes around and there's foxes around and bears around. And it wasn't only to protect the dog, it was to protect the wild animals because they could get harmed. We had dens of foxes around my house. You didn't want mommy and daddy to get harmed by the dog.
Mm.
So it gets back to what Valli was saying before is, learn to read your dog. And is it 100% no? But I'll bet you're good. I'm fairly good at predicting when rough and tumble play will escalate. I'm not perfect. There's been a few times where I blew it, but I'm pretty good about it,
Yeah.
and make sure your dog knows something that means stop doing what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay, by the way, if something happens that is not predicted, to go no, because I hear people, Boulder's like the city of crystals and fluff and all that. I love living here, by the way. It's okay to say no. Sometimes, I mean, I had to do that in the mountains and just scream no.
Yep.
But the reason they were trained visually is because if I yelled and there was a cougar or a bear around, the cougar, they're really smart, they're prudent predators. They'd be on those dogs in a heartbeat because I called attention to them.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a great comment in here too from Debbie that I've heard from many people. It's everyone thinks their dog has a great recall, which is largely true. I'm a big fan of, if you want to let your dog off when you're on the trail, keep their leash on, so that when I come running around the corner, there's something you can do to at least hold them steady while I go past. Or when I had a dog who could be reactive on leash, it's I'm not coming until your dog's on leash too, because he may be well behaved and come up, but my dog's not going to like it. And I think it's considering that it is a shared space is really kind of a big part of that. Is this is not ours, it is not mine, it's everyone's, and we all have to use it. So we all have to be respectful of the space and of each other.
Yeah.
Now, one thing you did touch on, dog parks. This is a very contentious one. Valli, I am going to time you on this though. But there are times that dog parks can be very good. I think they're a wonderful idea.
Mhm.
But they can also go sideways very quickly and have a lot of
Absolutely.
problems. So,
Absolutely.
Valli, what would you say makes for a good dog park visitor and overall maybe a good park? So, if you're new to an area or you're new with a dog and you're looking at the dog park, what are the considerations?
Yeah, I mean, Mark is probably going to have a lot more opinions about dog parks, having spent so many time in dog parks, because I do not go to dog parks. And I have gone to dog parks, and
Mhm.
one of the reasons that I no longer go is number one, I mean, you know, there's always people who just don't pay attention. There's that
Absolutely. Yeah.
dog that is kicking around and bugging people, and their guardian, their owner is not anywhere in sight. And
Yeah.
and it's, there's too many, to me, there's too many personalities, there's too much, potential for conflict. And for me, it's just not an option for my dog that, is now just doesn't want to be around that many dogs, first of
Mhm.
all, as he gets older. Um, and secondly, like, I think there's new alternatives to dog parks, like sniff spots, where you can rent out, for seven
Yes.
bucks an hour, you can rent out a
Yep.
private area,
Yep.
and then you can let your dog off leash. Or, you know, if you can't have your dog off leash somewhere, then get a long line. There's these amazing biothane, 25-foot long lines now
Mhm.
that you can have. It very much mimics being off leash. And that's where you can start practicing your recall. I mean, I had, my new dog is never off leash with us, but he's on a long line when we go out to the yard, the schoolyard, to
Mhm.
have a bit of a sniff, because I don't have a recall on him. But my other dog, we practice recall, like, and I've recalled him off a coyote once, as when we were in a farm field. Like,
Mhm.
I've practiced recall, and I still reward him every single time he recalls or checks in. He gets a
Exactly.
every time, because he
Yep.
knows. He knows that, that recall is guaranteed, something. And when he recalled off that coyote, he got 20 sardines. Like, he got the jackpot of recall for sure. But Mark, you might have some other.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, um, there was an article, I think it was in the New York Times. It was in some big rag in the States that basically said all dog parks are bad, and they're not. I mean, so I, I have a very simple rule of thumb. If you and your dog like to go to dog parks, go. If you like to go, but your dog doesn't go, go alone. If your
Yeah.
dog likes to go and you don't like to go, find somebody to take them who can who knows your dog and
Yes.
can keep them to behave.
Yeah.
And of course, if neither of you like to go, don't go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it really almost invariably, and I've got I want to say thousands of just observations of dogs at dog parks. A lot of it comes down to people go to the dog park, they're socializing, they're not watching their dog. People go to a dog park with a dog who they don't really know, their own dog, by the way. You know, people aren't fluent in dogs, so they misread signals, and a dog growls at another dog, and there's nothing aggressive or assertive about it at all. Dogs bark and growl.
Mhm.
The other one, of course, is sniffing privates, and people get up really upset, and they'll say, "What do you think?" And I'll say, "They're just dogs. That's what dogs do." No, I
Yeah.
mean, and there, as you know too, Callie, there's certain things that are dog appropriate. Well, you all know that, but not human appropriate, And in Canine Confidential, I identified a dog. He was called Gus the Groiner because all Gus wanted to do was stick his nose in human and canine groins. Very normal. That's how they pick up all this information.
Mhm.
But I
A lot of
think
smells in there.
there's a lot of smells
A lot of
in there,
smells
and
in there, yeah.
and I just think it really once again comes down to a lot of it comes down to people not knowing their dog, or it comes down to people not really learning who their dog is. So if they're playing, people, I mean, I have so many notes and stories from the dog park. People say my dog tends to play really roughly. never has had a fight. What do you think? And I'll say, well, she's got to find another dog who wants to play rough,
Yeah.
who won't allow it to escalate into a fight.
Yeah.
But my experience at a whole lot of different dog parks has been uniformly positive, but more positive at some than others. But the negativity has really, to me, really come down most of the time, not all the time, because by the way, people do unpredictable things too, if you didn't know. But dogs can do unpredictable things, but it's gonna be happen. It's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
But most of the time, when people spend time watching their dog, there was a woman who used to drop her dog off at the dog park at 7 and come back at 9. Well, I do not like that, but her dog was a love muffin. Everyone loved the dog, and they would say, "Where's the dog's human?" I think I was the only one who knew that the dog's human wasn't there. And a
That's
few times I said,
wild.
"I'm their human."
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But the dog parks are great for enriching the life. My feeling is they're great for enriching the life of a dog when they can meet buddies. And you can learn so much about how dogs form new groups. It's very similar to the way wolves might form new groups, certainly how coyotes form new groups. What happens when an animal is ostracized? So I got these people, and in fact, just last week, I got a video from a woman, I didn't know her, of her dog doing something, wanting to know what the dog was doing. So I guess this is almost a concluding comment. When you really reinforce the positive aspects of, say, the human dog bond, and that people can keep learning about their dog, it's enriching for the people too. And I've had people say, I never knew my dog would do that. Well,
Mhm.
watch them. I mean, and become an ethologist.
Yep.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but it
Become an
all comes
expert in your own dog, right?
exactly.
Mhm.
To me, it comes down to the fact that living with a dog is a huge responsibility. Choosing to bring a dog in, and yes, rescuing a dog could be perilous. And I know of some situations where the people have done everything they could, but I know some situations where people have gotten a dog who was not aggressive, but pretty uncontrollable in many ways. They became ranch dogs where they had a great life. I mean, just a great life.
Yeah.
Um, but it sometimes gets down to the fact that bringing a dog into certain people's lives or they're choosing to do is ill-advised. And I'm pretty open about it because the individual who's going to suffer is the dog. Not
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the people will have mental anguish. Yes, I know all that. But in the end, if it's two strikes and you're out, you know what I mean? You can't just have a dog have a successive homes and be a happy dog.
Yeah, that's
So
very true. And
yeah.
that sometimes is what leads to a lot of bigger, deeper emotional issues for rescue dogs, is if they bounce around, it
Yes,
creates more uncertainty and more insecurities for them.
exactly.
Now, this has been an incredible conversation. We've had a lot of great questions coming in. I want to conclude our conversation, then move to that because we're already a little over time. But I'd like to kind of wrap up on a note that I think is important. And that's the idea of many of the people here on this call, we love dogs, we love wildlife, we want the best. And we've talked a bit about how we can try and make that work, how we can enrich dogs' lives so they're not running around in natural spaces where the wildlife
Hmm.
are, they're not
Hmm.
harassing wildlife. But a big part of this is also going to be the people who don't necessarily have the capacity for all of those considerations. They may not
Hmm.
know. And it's that situation of you don't know what you don't know. Um, so, Valli, how do you recommend people approach that? Do you have tips for when there is these situations? If this was more of a town hall format as opposed to this sort of interview webinar, and was a lot of folks from all different places, do you have points you try and stick to, or a way of communicating some of what we've talked about?
I mean, I think, one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation is learn about dog body language, first of all. I
Hmm.
think that's kind of the biggest one is really start to learn the difference between your dog's tail wags, facial features, and what those mean. And then I think, if you are going to be in national parks or wildlife heavy areas, use a leash, use a long line if you want more of that off leash kind of adjacent feeling. If you don't have a really good recall, follow your leash laws, especially in national parks, especially. And also, wildlife can be dangerous to dogs.
Hmm.
Mhm.
It's not just the other way around,
Yep.
right? Like one kick from a deer, like I'm sorry, but that can take your dog out, right? So it's not just, it goes both ways. It's dogs potentially harassing wildlife, but it's also the other way around. Like that can be really dangerous and we see this, people do not know how dangerous wildlife can be,
Yeah.
especially ungulates, right? We're
Yeah.
seeing this all over social media. People are out there ta taking selfies with bison, getting out of their cars to take selfies with grizzly bears. And yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
there's some issues out there. But I think, it's being really simple in your messaging, right?
Yeah.
It's the fact that like learn your dog's body language, follow your leash laws, take your dog to a sniff spot that's, fenced in if you feel like you want your dog to have some off-leash freedom, but you don't have a good recall, and be aware that, it can be dangerous for you and your dog if your dog's off leash and harassing wildlife, because that animal, can be tolerant to a certain extent and can turn around and be like, I'm not gonna take this anymore.
Mhm.
So, I think there's just some very simple
Yeah.
ways to explain this to folks.
Yeah. Nice.
Debbie
And
just made a comment. People can be so stupid. I just saw it pop up.
yeah.
I don't have the comments open. Yeah. Sometimes I mean, to me, sometimes it just comes down to the lack of common sense.
It's, sorry,
I, you know.
Debbie's comment came up as you were saying that. What are you suggesting? Common sense and common courtesy?
Oh, I see that. Yes.
As
Thank
you
you,
said,
Debbie.
common sense. Yeah, sorry.
I don't know you, Debbie, but I'm glad we're thinking about the same thing. Right. I mean, I know people because I've done field work in different areas where they'll bring their dog. I mean, first of all, the reason I don't want the dog there is because the animals who you're studying know your dog is there.
Yeah.
You may say, "Oh, they're far away." I'm going to tell you something, and I don't mean being cosmic or that there's some spiritual thread in the universe. Dogs pick up information over distances that would blow your mind.
Yeah,
Mhm.
100%.
Okay.
For
So
sure.
you could be changing the behavior of the very animals who you want to study.
Mhm.
But just think about what you're doing out there. You're trespassing into at least in the United States, in decreasing amount of square mileage or kilometers that wild animals actually have to be their homes. So you don't have to take your dog.
Yeah.
And
No,
if you
you're
are in
right.
a place, um, you're right, keep them on a lead. But I mean, once again, you all know this. I mean, dogs are giving off odors. They may be making sounds that you don't hear, but the animals could hear. So you just, to me, you have to be really overprotective when you, and not only overprotective, I think what Mike was saying too, not only overprotective of your dog, but overprotective of the very wild animals. When we studied coyotes, and I know there's other observations, and there were dogs around, we saw some really fascinating dog coyote interactions, especially among, coyote pups playing. Um,
Mhm.
was it good? I mean, I'm not going to say it's good or bad, but the people who had these dogs were very responsible, and there was never a report of anything, quote, bad coming out of it. But when you go into a national park or you go into a wildlife an area where dogs are allowed off leash, you're a trespasser.
Mhm.
I don't really care, around Boulder, people get really holier than thou. Well, we were out there and God, we saw a bear, so did my dog chase the bear. What do you think? And I think first of all, that's irresponsible because a bear could swat your dog and kill your dog. But around here, the city, and I know that we're not the only one, when there are nesting birds in these hills that you see behind the Flatirons, you can't hike or climb. There's a moratorium or whatever you want to call it, a ban on it for certain months, but
Yeah.
But just because you're out in the wilderness, and not all dogs like running free, they pick up the scent of an animal. I mean, some of my dogs and my neighbor's dogs, when there were cougars around, I knew there was a cougar around because they go out the front door and turn around and go right back in, only to
Yeah.
verify later that my neighbors, saw a cougar. But I think it all comes down once again, or most of it comes down to people knowing your dog. And if your dog goes out and looks around, tucks their tail, acts like they're scared, they probably are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
And that's one of the takeaways I had. Just a final thought on that from Marc's books was sometimes you really need to think about what a dog is trying to convey. And we talked about that earlier, all the different components of their body language, the way their fur is moving, the way their tail is moving, all of these things. And other times it's really obvious. Like they turn around and come back in. Okay, you're telling me something. I don't need to know the in depth version of it. I
yeah,
can tell.
yeah,
And that's good enough.
yeah.
Well, we've gone over time a bit, and there's a couple of questions I want to get to quickly, if we can.
I'm here.
Um, the one that came up in the Q&A from Desi, who I think has left, but we'll keep this in the recording for them. As a person who is changing careers in their 30s and has stumbled into the world of coyote human relations, do you have any advice for someone entering this field through a non-traditional route? I am passionate about exploring the intersection of human wildlife relations, especially around the animals on the margins of human compassion. Why don't we start with Marc?
Well, I mean, I get similar emails or queries like that. One thing is, maybe you could get a job, depending where you live, of course. Like in Boulder, you could become a volunteer because volunteers are really popular now because you don't have to pay them, and there's lots of funds. With Boulder County Mountain Parks open space.
Mm,
There's coyotes around. I can push a product because I will. You could go online and you could go to the field site for Project Coyote, which a woman named Camilla Fox runs, which is an outstanding, user-friendly, compassionate wildlife group, and see if they have any suggestions. Um, I know around the places I live, not where I live, but also other places where there are, I call them wild neighbors coming down. There's almost always a need for volunteers.
mm, yeah,
Um,
Mhm.
cheap, I say cheap labor, but I did this years ago. It's not labor. You're outside. I mean, you're being paid, if you will, to learn skills that will come and benefit you later on. To say, because I get, people who volunteer for 100 hours around here know more about the wildlife than I do, where they are, who they are. They learn to identify individuals. It's really exciting for them. But the one thing they pick up that's, I think, pertinent to our discussion is they learn that you need to respect these animals as wild animals, even if they're living on the interface of a city or a town like Boulder.
yeah,
They are wild. They're wild animals. They're not domesticated. People confuse socialized with domesticated. People will talk about the socialized. It's rarely a socialized cougar, but sometimes a black bear or a coyote. I'm going to know that they're not domesticated. They're socialized. They know you and they avoid you.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Or you don't feel afraid around them, but they're not domesticated. That's a completely different process.
Yeah.
Um, and
They're
I
able
would
to
tell
live
her, oh, yeah, go
together.
ahead.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
yeah.
follow your heart.
Yeah.
Just go do it. I mean, as time goes on, wild animals, wild neighbors, if you will, are going to need all the help they can get. They just are. I always say that the Anthropocene, people call it the age of humanity, and I call it the rage of inhumanity because
mm,
that's really what it is. It's thoroughly anthropocentric, selfishly and arrogantly anthropocentric, and these animals need all the help they can get. So
well said.
I'll get off my pastoral stool.
Valli, what about you? What suggestions do you have?
I mean, I can really relate to this because I entered, went back to school in my 30s, completely changed my career. I actually have a master's in library studies. And then I lived in Africa for a couple years where I was volunteering and working at a wildlife college as their librarian, and came back in my, mid 30s. And no, I'm lying. I turned 30 in Botswana. So I was at late 20s. And then yeah, and then, decided to do a PhD in human wildlife conflict as a
Hmm.
social scientist. So,
Great.
there are many ways to enter the field, whether it's kind of volunteering and upskilling and then kind of getting a job through that, and that, or going back to school and doing a master's, or
Oh,
maybe doing a PhD. If you want to go through many years of education, then yeah, graduate from grade 26 or whatever it is. You can
yeah.
go and do that, and you never really know where life is going to take you. I mean, I went from wildlife conservation and human wildlife conflict in Africa to domestic dogs in northern Canada. So it really, is the world is interesting at times, but I was lucky enough to find an amazing advisor, in a social science program that focused on wildlife, and I think that's happening a lot
What,
more these days.
where
So
was this?
I was at the University of Guelph working
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Alice Havorka,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, who's now
Right.
at work. Yeah. We
This,
had emailed a couple times, Mark, back in the day when I was in my like first year of my grad studies. But yeah, we kind of had some conversations around landscape of fear, and was kind of
yeah.
interested in that, but I went in a different direction. But yeah, it's there's a lot of ways to get into it. My very good friend did her PhD on human coyote
Hmm.
relationships as
Yeah,
well. So,
it's a
yeah.
hot area because coyotes are so, so many urban. There's there's a new center for you'll have to look it up. I'm saying it generically to your audience. At Colorado State University, and a woman named Rebecca Nemec is running it, and it's something like the Center for Human Animal Relationships or something like that. And she's a dynamo on studying a lot of human attitudes, different aspects of human attitudes to different animals. But I just had dinner with her last night, and they have programs going that are, I mean, everything we've talked about today would be central to this center. I think it's called what
Totally.
universities have because they're academics with their heads mind, of institutes and centers and this and that. But there's ways you can get this background, and I know there's a program on conservation. I mean, it's sort of focusing a lot on conservation and, if you will, in urban areas. Maybe that's,
Mhm.
Mm,
yeah,
Yeah.
you can do it. If
yeah.
you really have the heart to do it, just
Yeah.
go
And
fucking
it's not
do
just the science
it.
track. That's the other thing to keep
Oh,
in mind. I came to all of this work as a journalist. I was
yeah.
covering crime and politics and started learning about coyotes because they were, in the area, and I knew a little bit about dogs and
Yep.
just sort of fall forward into it. There's so many different components of this work.
Totally.
Lots of colleges have new environmental related diploma and certificate programs too that get you in the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a
Yeah.
lot of great opportunity there.
Yeah.
We've got one more question I want to
Yeah.
get to before we wrap up because we are coming up on 90 minutes. There's a couple of different questions asking about dog body language, and I would maybe broaden this to wildlife body language. Is there a good source to go to learn some of these basics? I know myself, I learned a lot. Mark, forgive me, I don't know if it was Dogs Demystified
Yeah.
or Unleash Your Dogs, where you get into how to be an ethologist, and you've
So,
got like a chapter on that I found very helpful.
yeah, the last chapter of Canine Confidential is called How to Be. Oh, I think it's So You Want to Be an Ethologist.
Yeah.
Um, I wrote an article, a short essay on that for Psychology Today, and you could find that. I mean, Dogs Demystified, I did, and it started out, whenever you write a book, it starts out as fun, it ends up as fun, but I don't mean that it's so aversive that you're going to stop. But the reason I wrote Dog Demystified was to overcome the plethora of myths out there that a wagging tail means a happy dog. just overcome it. And it's just laid out from A to Z. And what turned out to be a publishing decision, because the book was overlong and I was stubborn and I didn't want to cut it, was all the references are on my homepage.
Yes.
Because that cut out like 300 pages of small type that no one's ever going to read anyway. Frankly, that's a good place to go. But, you can just go online, and just think of ethology as being detailed observations. You make your ethogram, which is just a menu of what the animals do. You don't put motivation, you don't put anything on it. Take films. And I hesitate to say take the films and send it to me because I don't want a million of them. But I get films from all over the place. They're usually film clips. And I love it because the people are saying, I want to know what my dog is doing there. A lot of times I can tell, but a lot of times I'm honest to say, I don't know your dog, so I don't know what they're doing. This woman had Harry the Humper dog. Her dog would hump everything. I said, I don't know why your dog is doing it. I don't know who the recipient is. I don't know anything, but really just careful observations. You can find dog ethograms online. And if you really want to figure out what your dog is doing, I don't know if Valli does it, but I do know a few dog trainers, I like to call them dog teachers, dog educators, who would be willing to talk to you and not really charge you. I mean, I hate to say it that way. I know people make their living doing this. Or send me a short clip, a minute. But really just watch your dog and appreciate your dog for who they are and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And
Well
also,
said.
context is going to be super important, right?
Exactly.
Dog body language, like, my resident dog, him and Sully, Husk and Sully have started playing now,
Mhm.
and Husk last week was humping Sully like crazy, right? And that's just, he's over aroused. This is a new dog. He's excited, doesn't know where to put all this energy, and it has started to calm down now. So like, different context, different environment, different, like Mark was saying, different recipients, different reasons why a dog may be doing something. So always think about, not just your dog, what they're doing, but what are they doing in that moment? What's happening around them in the environment? All of that is going to be really important as well. And I did put a couple of links of I dropped in the chat there. Lily Chin has a great dog body language book. You can get it on her website or Amazon. And, it's very simple. It breaks down a lot of dog body language. And then two of my, favorite trainers that I speak to and, buy resources from, because I don't know everything. I learn from my colleagues as well. Up to Snuff and Bravo Dog Behavior are two folks that I know have some really great dog body language resources as well for folks. So, yeah.
Excellent.
But I think I always say we can end, but we could go on for hours.
We could, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a
Very,
meeting.
very
canceled.
realistically can. Yeah.
But no, context is key. And that's pure classical ethology. A threat in one context or what looks to be a threat might not be a threat. That's what I was saying before. Oh, my dog growls a lot. They're aggressive. So I actually went to see this dog in Boulder. The dog was a marshmallow. It wasn't aggressive at all. That's how the dog expressed themselves.
Yeah.
The lady said, well, he growls too much. And I went, well, you think he's growling too much. Maybe he's pissed off at you because you're misreading him. No, I mean, I didn't say it so overtly, but the lady was lovely. She's a lovely woman. She knew nothing about dogs. And some dog trainer around here who uses shocks collars said, we need to shock him to stop him from growling. No, I'm picking up on that because it all comes back. Fluent in dog and context is, I mean, think of your friends. Think of I can think of my friends who are normally, they may not be normal, but they're nice people. But they'll say something that seems out of context. It's just who they are. They'll do something that's out of context. So there's nothing abnormal about what they're doing. Dogs, the same. So I'm glad you said that, Valli, because context is key.
Yeah.
And if you dare think about yourself, I don't mean yourself, but
Yeah.
we all do things and people go, what the hell's going on here? And they'll go, oh, that's just Mark, that's just Mike, that's just Sydney, that's just Val,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
that's who you are, your individual personality.
Yeah.
So no, this is
Never
great.
punish a growl.
Yep.
Victoria's right. Never punish a growl because
Yep,
if you punish a growl, they don't have any warning systems left.
Mhm.
It
exactly.
goes straight to a bite. And
God,
then
this
that's
is what a
everything.
great discussion. It's so wide ranging.
Yeah. Well, and it's
It has
fascinating
been,
because a
yeah,
lot of the stuff we're talking about with dogs and ethology and body language
Hmm.
applies not, mirrored to, but the concepts apply to all the wildlife we're talking about as well. As you can learn to read their body language. Mike McIntosh at Bear With Us Sanctuary in Ontario. I've known him for a few years. I've seen a few of his presentations, and he'll do these fascinating ones where he shows a bluff charge from a giant black bear and it
Uh-huh.
looks terrifying. And then he goes, yeah. And then I took a step forward and the bear turned and ran away because a bluff charge is not aggressive. A bluff charge is a defensive communication saying, I'm unhappy with this.
yeah,
I want you to back up. It's not an attack. They clack their jaws and make a weird noise to
I,
communicate. Like there's all of these different things, all of these different living creatures do to communicate. Really, our job is to just listen sometimes.
yeah.
and watch him. I developed a great relationship with a yearling black bear up at my house in the mountains, which was only about 5 miles from where I live, because I used to leave my bike out in it was my outer office. Had been a garage. I came out of the door. I turned around and there's a bear about 3 meters from me. I threw my bike at him, and well, I mean, I knew it was a young bear, and I mean, he looked at me like, I don't ride a bike. I mean, I mean, what are you doing? And thank goodness nothing happened to the bike. So over the course of 3 weeks, I developed a relationship with him. Mom, on the other hand, his mother, she was not sure about me. I would go out, he would sit on a rock about 20 meters away. I would be close enough to the door so if he decided he really didn't like me, I could get inside. But to me as an ethologist, it was really fun that after a while he just sat there and went, what is this human doing getting this thing out with two wheels and they actually have to pedal and work to go up there and stuff like that. And it was really rewarding. And only once did I feel fear from the family because it was another cub and mom was when mom was around.
Yeah.
She did not like, I want to say like me. Why are you intruding? Why are you messing around with my child? Because that's who this bear was her child. But for me, it was such a learning experience over time, so yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's the best spot that we can really stop right now. I was just trying to get Valli's Instagram link handy, and I didn't do it fast enough, and I can't talk and search Instagram at the same time apparently. But Sydney, who has been an all-star for us, sharing links and chatting with folks, will
Yeah,
I'm
thank you,
certain
Sydney.
share that. There it is, Live to Wild Dogs. It's a great channel to follow and support. Well, everyone, thank you so much. There's still
Yeah,
over 30 people sitting here with us after 90
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
this is
Amazing. This has been a ton of fun. I've been looking forward to doing this for a while. I got through two-thirds of my questions, so we might need to do a follow-up at some point.
anytime. This is great.
Anytime.
We
Yeah.
covered so much ground,
Yeah.
which I think what I love about it for dogs is dogs are like we started, they're not just homed creatures.
Mhm.
And they're not just dogs. They're dogs in the world of humans and other animals.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we need to appreciate that. So
Yeah.
very cool. Well, thank you all.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Again, if you're looking to learn more about Dr. Valli Fraser-Celin, you can visit thefurbears.com, where she writes a twice a month SciComm article, which is always fascinating. You can also follow Lives of Wild Dogs on Instagram. And
Oh,
for Marc, you can visit marcbekoff.com and find his books online at marcbekoff.com or in your local library. And most of them have at least one of them because there's a bunch. Also, the Psychology Today. I don't know if I
yeah.
have that one handy either.
Well, I
Um,
can make this offer to the people,
mhm.
and if I miss something, get back to me. But I have an ever-growing list. I call it my dog group, and
Mm,
I finally because I have the computer literacy of a moron, I finally figured out how I could easily add names to it. So if you want to get on my dog group, and I also have a Google group on compassionate conservation and animal cognition, animal emotions, I can add you to it. It's harder to add a person to the Google group because if you don't have a Gmail account or you have a weird account, they won't take you, which I found was just the epitome of arrogance. But I could add you to my dog group easily because after 10 years, I figured out last week how I could add people without having to drink a 6-pack of beer and curse myself for saying, I'll add you. But I would.
Excellent.
So we could do that. Or you can join my Psych Today group actually via Psych Today. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
psychologytoday.com. Under the blog section, you can find Mark. I think it's the Emotional Lives of Animals.
Animal Emotions.
Animal Emotions. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Yep. Again.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, she's quick. Sydney again rocking it in the chat.
Sydney, did you do that?
Yeah. I did.
God, I'm going to hire you.
No.
No, seriously, that would have taken me a month at least.
And on that note, I'm calling it.
Great.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure and joy. The recording of this will be available online to everyone. And thank you again. It's been great.
Great.
Thanks so much for having us. Yeah, it's been super fun.
Thanks,
awesome.
Michael. We'll do this again. Great.
Thank you.
Take care, y'all. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.